Any other questions? Okay, with the hand there. Let me see what body is with the hand.
Just curiosity, why were you in prison in Uganda?
Sorry?
Why were you in prison in Uganda?
Oh, curiosity, okay. Well, curiosity almost killed the cat. Because I was curious. Your curiosity is relevant, because I was also curious to see what was going on there. Because it was in the 70s, and you may, if you know the history of the world in the 70s, you've probably heard of Idi Amin. Anyone heard of Idi Amin? Anyone heard of him? You must have heard of him. Historically, quite a famous person. Like Bin Laden or something. He was, in one sense, as an individual, probably much more in the modes of nature than Bin Laden or anyone if he actually exists. Idi Amin did it first. And he was quite a notorious character. He was a man-eater. Did you know that? He was a man-eater, a notorious man-eater, child-eater. Also, he ate anything, human flesh. He inaugurated. No, he didn't. Prabhupada was before him. He established. Maybe you heard from Prabhupada about the Sunday Love Feast. He used to have a Sunday Love Feast on Lake Victoria. He used to invite his friends out for a Sunday Love Feast and feed them to the crocodiles. It was one of his favorite sports. He converted temples. There were hundreds of thousands of Hindus living in Uganda. And there are many temples, everywhere temples. Many of them were converted into shooting ranges. He used to love to shoot people in various ways. But he especially liked to eat human flesh. That was his favorite delicacy. So he was a bit of a Rakshasa, to say the least. He was really a living Rakshasa. He was shrouded with voodoo. His car got blown up one day. He walked out without a scratch. Everyone else was blown to shreds. He had some black magic protecting him at certain times. Of course, the enemy did too. Eventually he lost. So anyway, he was quite a character. Now in 1979, the Tanzanian army were equally Rakshasic almost. They drove him out, amongst others, and he had to go to the Arabian countries. So at that time, there had been 4,000 people, I think had been 4 million people rather had been slaughtered during his regime in Uganda, and others had left the country. And at that time, after he left, we'd had a couple of devotees from Uganda, and they'd escaped from Uganda during that regime, came to Kenya. A couple of people of them had joined the movement. I don't think they were really serious. I think it was just like a means of shelter rather than a serious endeavor to become Krishna conscious by the looks of it. Anyway, one of them, there was something going on in Kenya at that time. I wanted to get out of Kenya. I won't tell that story, but I wanted to get out of Kenya. So this one Ugandan boy, he said, now that Idi Amin is gone, we can go back. We had addresses. Some people had sent messages to us in Uganda being seemingly interested in Krishna consciousness. So I went with this boy to Uganda. He said he had land, he had property, we could use it as some kind of make an effort, maybe we can preach there. So we went there. And as soon as we arrived in Tororo, which was the first stop town, we got arrested. We got out of that one. Then we got on the train, we got arrested on the train. And then we had to go to the police station, immigration, everything in Kampala, Single. We got away with that one. And then we went to his hometown. And once we were in Kampala, it was a bomb site. There was nothing in any shops. They were just empty, and everything was smashed. There were guns and bombs going off all night, and the place was just chaos. Chaos. Because the Tanzanian army were in there, and they were rooting out anyone who had any inkling of relationship with Idi Amin. There was fighting going on, basically. Anyway, we somehow made in a truck. We made our way up on the back of a truck, some kind of grain truck, trying to take some kind of relief across the desert to some of these places because the roads were all smashed. So we managed to reach this town where he lived, and then I went to his house, which happened to be a mud hut in the village outside the town. That was his property that we could use. And I never did see the land. I don't think it even existed. But whilst we were there, I went into the local town, and it was quite an experience, actually. It happened to be a solar eclipse. I had no idea. A complete solar eclipse. in Uganda on that day. I had no idea. Everything went dark. I was out there on my own with a bag of Swahili Back to God magazines, and I was chanting, and then a lot of people gathered around, and I had these magazines. So, and I started distributing the magazines, and it was quite heavy. Some of the people were, fanatics, Christians in that time. And they were quite heavy, but anyway, we distributed all the magazines, and then I had to walk back to this village. So I walked back to the village, but it was really weird, this solar eclipse. I walked back to the village, and I got back to the village, and that evening, I had a terrible, terrible fever. I'd never had a fever like it in my life. I really thought I was going to die. In the middle of that, suddenly there was this bang, and these big Tanzanian army officers crashed into the hut, smashed the door down, and I could hear banging and screaming in the kind of partition area on the other side of the hut, that they were beating the Ugandan fellow who was with me. Then they burst into the room I was in, and they just told me, "Get up!" And I could hardly move, and I was just shaking. It was a fever. And anyway, I had no choice with machine guns in your face. I had to get up, and they said, "Passport." I gave them the passport. I found it. I said, "Forgery." That was the end of my passport. Money. Black market. That was the end of it. The big guy was like a big gorilla. He spoke a little bit of English, not enough to say things like forgery and black market. And then they just took off, and they just left. And they took the money and the passport, and they were gone. Just four of them. And then, so I was just, we were already suffering enough. This was extra mercy. And then the next day, they came back again. This time they came back with a whole fleet of trucks. And the whole village ran for their lives, because they would just ransack villages, and rape the women and kill the men, smash everything. They were supposed to be liberating the country, but they were just raping it. So they came in with their trucks. They could be heard from a long distance, across the kind of the valley. And so the village just emptied out. And I didn't. I couldn't leave because I couldn't walk, practically. I was just lying there. Nothing. I had no passport. What am I going to do anyway? And I was just about conscious of what was going on. And my friend also stayed. Give credit to him. Could have run. He did stay. And then they just came in with their whole group of us, there were 20 of them. And all their machine guns and everything. Heavy guys. Get up! Walk! And amazing, actually, this is incredible, because although you feel like you can't even talk, when faced with let's say a higher challenge, the lower challenge becomes insignificant. And Krishna consciousness of it like that. When we realize the urgency of it, then everything else becomes, even though we have no quality, no capacity, everything else becomes meaningless. You just do it. It's such an important thing. So somehow or another, it's just like, wow. When you say like a mother, she's been shot and recently attacked or something. But when her child is at threat, she doesn't care about that. Even though she's got a broken leg, she'll walk if necessary. Some by higher power to save her child. That's how it works when there's a higher force in place. You can do anything. So I got up and I walked, and they said, climb in the truck. There was like a cattle truck they had. You had to climb over it and get inside. There's about a dozen of these guys in there with their guns. I had to sit down, my friend. We had to sit down there on the chair, on the bench, two one each side, and with all these army guys looking at us with their guns. And then we couldn't see out because it was like high side, no window. And then we just drove off. And there were small slats. It was like a cattle truck, so we could see a little bit. And then we drove into the jungle, deep into the jungle. And they were talking in Swahili. And my friend was telling me what they were saying. They said they're taking us to shoot us.